I now invite Jean Brown to come forward to light the chalice and lead us in our affirmation of covenant, which is in your order of service.
I light this chalice with these words: open our eyes to see what is beautiful, open our minds to learn what is true, and open our hearts to love one another. Please join me in the affirmation of covenant, which you will find printed in your order of service.
Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with one another. There is a genre of story we might call a prophet story. A person sees that something must be done and acts, but some people aren't ready for change because they have a stake in the way things are. They harass, resist, get violent. We know some stories like that, have even witnessed some play out in real life. Fausto Sozzini saw this kind of story as a human story, and he lived that kind of story too. He was born Fausto Paolo Sozzini in Siena, Italy, into times that would become more and more dangerous for religious dissenters. His father, the eldest of 11 brothers, died when Fausto, his only son, was a toddler, and bequeathed a quarter of the family estates to him. So at age 17 or so, Fausto became financially independent. Talk about dangerous. Because 3 of his uncles were suspected of Lutheranism, in mid-16th century Italy, all Protestant ideas were called Lutheran. Suspicion of heresy also fell on him. Family business soon took him to Lyon, France, a center of the publishing industry. There, his first book appeared, an interpretation of the opening chapter of John's Gospel. You've heard that biblical text. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and so on. His interpretation, shall we say, justified suspicion. Already he articulated his core idea that it was not Jesus, but his office that was divine. God bestowed on Jesus miraculous power to perform his role as Messiah or Christ, but Jesus himself remained fully human. This was heresy even to Protestants. At age 23 or so, however, he was able to return to Italy, having found protection in Florence in the household of Cosimo de' Medici as a servant of Cosimo's daughter, Isabella. In this role, he remained in Italy 12 more years. At 35, he departed for Switzerland, and in the nick of time. The next year, Isabella was strangled by her husband, but her brother, now the Grand Duke, guaranteed him the income from his property so long as he published nothing in his own name. Don't bring any scandal on us, and don't keep the money coming. He spent about 3 years in Basel, translating Psalms into Italian verse and engaging in theological debates. He wrote a theological treatise that, though unpublished, circulated in manuscript as far afield as Transylvania, where it inspired Giorgio Biandrata to invite Sozzini to come and help him restrain Ferenc David's leanings towards dangerously more radical religious ideas. He stayed a famous 4.5 months in David's house. David charged him rent, but to no avail, and soon after he relocated from Switzerland to Poland, then a land of religious tolerance, where he remained for the rest of his life. He found a religious home among the Polish Brethren, or Minor Reformed Church. He married, and he had a daughter. Forced by a mob to leave the capital city of Krakow, he settled nearer the Polish Brethren's academy at Raków, where, mercifully, he died peacefully in his bed. Sozzini studied law before he studied theology. It is said he preferred writing sonnets while in law school, but he must have achieved some depth of legal understanding because it shows in his theological writing. A crucial part of how he understood Jesus and his ministry was his absolute rejection of the idea that Jesus had to die in a kind of legal remedy for the injury that humanity's collective sins had done to God. He wrote that this argument, known as the satisfaction theory of atonement, is a greater insult to God than any sin. It makes God a tyrant rather than a loving parent. It makes God small. Instead, he offered an interpretation of Jesus and his ministry and his death that honored the dignity of humanity, of Jesus, and of God. Sozzini interpreted Jesus as fully human. Jesus was different from other people, not because he was also divine, but because he was without sin. Sozzini held that Jesus inherited sinlessness from his mother, but did not inherit divinity from God. What he got from God was an assignment, a mission. He had to live a fully human life, experiencing the joys and sufferings of the human condition. And through his distinctive but human inheritance of sinlessness, was able to do so without contributing to his own suffering. Try that at home. This would prepare him, this experience of fully human life would prepare him for the office that he was to hold, acting on God's behalf from heaven as the chief priest of the church. Divine power did not come to Jesus by his birth as a kind of genetic inheritance, but rather was conferred upon him freely by God when he was resurrected from the dead. He wouldn't know what to do with such power without training in the full human experience, including death. Once his training was complete, he could assume his divine office and, as the Apostles' Creed says, come to judge the quick and the dead on God's behalf. His office is that of mediator between God and humankind. I can't help but see a parallel between Sozzini's dispute with the satisfaction theory of atonement and current dialogues about punitive versus restorative justice. The idea that an insult or injury to God had to be remedied by the death of Jesus is repugnant beyond the mere detail that Jesus died instead of the sinners responsible for the injury. It is not the substitution, but the violent retribution that is the fundamental problem with the satisfaction theory. That is exactly the critique we hear today of our criminal justice system. There has to be, at least in many cases, a better, less soul-crushing and life-destroying, more humane and growth-fostering way to handle the event of a crime than this regime of indiscriminate punishment. Similarly, Sozzini was saying there has to be a better way to understand Jesus, his ministry, and his death than the whole thing played out to satisfy a kind of divine lawsuit. Another virtue of Sozzini's interpretation is that it points toward an understanding of faith as something learned from experience and lived into. Interpreting the first chapter of John's Gospel, Sozzini made a point of saying that where the text has been translated as the Word became or was made flesh, the Greek verb rendered became or was made can equally be translated simply as was. The Word was flesh. Meaning that, as Sozzini put it, as the will of man is made known through words, so the will of God is made known through Jesus. The Word was in the form of flesh. That is, it is Jesus' example, not his life, how he moved in the world, as well as what he said. That is the divine message. Jesus' story, a prophet's story, an example of one who sees human need for healing and instruction and acts on it, ready or not, is what God meant to convey. We have many perspectives today, many more than Sozzini and the Polish brethren had within their communities. But may our faith, learn from experience, and ever something we live into more than have, be a source of liberation realized in love, the love we share, and a greater love we strive for. So may it be. Amen.
I invite our chalice lighter, Jean Brown, back up to extinguish our chalice. Please join me in saying our closing words, which are found in your order of service.
Go out into the world in peace, have courage, hold on to what is good, return no person evil for evil, strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the suffering, honor all beings, and may a liberating love be yours.